before we get started with our project, I want to talk to you about a concept that I think is really important inside of sculpture. And that's talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary forms and how those relationships all work together to produce a design that I think works from multiple distances from the camera. So if you're working on interactive art or art for movies or entertainment, a lot of times that asset might be seen from different vantage points, and it might be seen far away from the camera, a medium shot, and even close up. So you want to make sure that you have the right amount of detail in the right areas so your design works from all those different vantage points and angles. So what I've done is taken the images here of our design, and I'm going to break this down for you and show you what we need to kind of concentrate on. The first thing is you need to work on your large forms, and these are your large proportional shapes. And this stage is super important for the rest of the project. So no matter how much detail and cracks and everything that you put on something, or if it's a creature or a character, how many wrinkles you put on there, or skin pores, if you don't get the foundational parts right, and you don't get the proportions right, it's going to carry through for the entire duration of the project, and your project will just never be as strong as it can possibly be because you've never got the foundation right. So at this stage, we would be concentrating on these larger forms and how they relate to each other, where you can see we've got more of a kind of a square shape that sits on top of a longer rectangle, and then the rocks at the bottom, the size and the relationship of those kind of matter, and how they sit and their angle that they have. And so that's the first read that we need to get set up, and we need to make sure that that's correct. And we shouldn't move on to the next stage until we're absolutely positive that we have this stage correct. Now, it might seem like this should be the simplest stage, but really it's kind of difficult, and a lot of people get this wrong at the very beginning. As you get a little bit more familiar with the art and creating these things, you'll start to feel more comfortable at this stage, and this stage can go faster for you. But I just think a really big mistake that people make at the very beginning is not paying attention to this stage and then moving forward too quickly because they want to get to that detail stage. It feels a bit more rewarding, and it makes you feel like you're making something of quality. But don't discount this stage, and make sure you give it the time and the attention that it deserves. After you've got your large forms made, the next stage that we'll focus on is the medium level detail, and you can see I've drawn this here in blue. And so for what we're working for with stone, this kind of matters for these cracks and the different kind of patterns that we're going to break up within here. And it also has to do with any kind of design elements that we add on here. So we're taking larger shapes and we're breaking them up into smaller shapes. We're still leaving a pretty good amount of bigger shapes within this shape breakup. But you can see how we've got this relationship between large forms, how much is being divided up with the medium level detail. And then after that's done, then you can move on to the smaller detail, the fine level detail. So this is your tertiary. And you can see here I've painted this in green, and this is really just surface noise. It's not going to change the depth of our project very much. It's not going to change that surface very much, but it's enough there that if we were able to zoom in on this and get close to this object, it's got enough detail within there to make sure that everything still seems pretty interesting as we move the camera much closer to that object. And what I've done here is I've built you a pie chart that you can kind of try to keep this in mind for yourself for the relationships, for how much you need as far as maybe time and attention and detail, and how much time and attention you need as you move the project forward. So in the red, you can see there's no perfect number for these ratios, but this is just maybe a general rule of thumb here. So you can see with the red, we definitely have more than 50% of our object, or 50% of our time that we've allocated for this. And in the blue, we've got at least about a fourth of our project, or a fourth of the amount of time and detail that we've got on here. And in the green, we've got a much smaller proportion there. So again, these proportions aren't exact science or anything, but it's just something for you to kind of gauge, and something for you to keep in the back of your mind as you work on these projects. So always keep this ratio in mind, the primary, secondary, and tertiary forms. If you concentrate on this, no matter what project type that you're making, if you keep these relationships in mind, you'll have a much more successful project at the end.